Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Today, the Rules Committee will consider three bills. First up will be the SOAR Reauthorization Act, then we'll move to H.R. 692, the Default Prevention Act, before concluding with H.R. 1937, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act of 2015. I'm delighted to see that today we have two very important members of Congress who not only are responsible for activities in the District of Columbia, but also the representative that represents the District of Columbia, who has not only great interest in the success of the young students of this district, but also his future. And I'm delighted that, of course, our young chairman of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, Jason Chevitz, is here with us, and certainly our delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton, will be not only welcomed with their presentation today, but we'll find it most instructive to hear from them as we move forward. I want to, before we acknowledge our fine witnesses today, to defer to the gentleman from Massachusetts, ranking member of the committee. The gentleman is recognized for any opening statement he would choose to make.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not going to take very much time because I'm looking at these three bills. They look familiar, like I think we've seen them before, and I think you could probably just Xerox my previous statements on them from previous hearings. But I want to be sensitive to the fact that I know that you have an important conference coming up tonight, and I want to make sure we can get done in time so that you could have plenty of time so that your right wing can fight with your far right wing, and I want to make sure that we can get out of here in a timely fashion. So with that, I will yield back my time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the gentleman's comments. It's always great to find when we have scholarship money, education money available for students who seek this opportunity to better their lives. Mr. Chairman, my son, who is now 26 years old at Texas Tech University Medical School, when he was in fourth grade, he said to me, "Dad, I want to be a doctor." And we looked at the school he was going to and had great confidence in it, but we felt like that maybe another school would offer him a specialization to get even better prepared for what his future would be. And I think that's what parents all around the United States do with their children. They challenge their children to accept new challenges and new awesome responsibilities, and they call those things dreams that are very good. And I think today you're here to talk with us about some of those dreams for children that I couldn't name one of them, but I will tell you they're alive and well in this city of D.C., and I know you're here to talk about them. Without objection, anything you haven't read will be into the record, and the gentleman from Utah, the young chairman, is recognized.
I thank the chairman, and I appreciate your holding this hearing and request a structured rule for the consideration of H.R. 10, Scholarships for Opportunity and Results Reauthorization Act, authored by Speaker John Boehner. H.R. 10 is a bipartisan piece of legislation that renews and reauthorizes the three-sector approach to education in the District of Columbia. The bill authorizes equal funding for D.C. public schools, D.C. public charter schools, and the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program, often referred to as the OSP. Funding granted through this bill is additional funding over and above any other education money D.C. receives from the federal government. Since 2004, the OSP provides D.C.'s low-income families the chance to place their children in a quality school. Approximately 6,000 scholarships have been awarded. During our committee markup, I shared the story of a student whose life was dramatically changed by the OSP. That student, Carlos Battle, is pursuing a college degree at Northeastern University, a path that would likely not have been possible without the program. During the committee's field hearing in May on the OSP, we heard from Shirley Ann Tomdio, a 9-year scholarship recipient who currently attends George Washington University. She gave some very stirring and personal remarks that were well received, I think, by all. Ms. Tomdio credits the OSP for contributing to her success and cites it as motivation for her moving forward. In her words, quote, "DC OSP continues to instill in me the courage and strength to continue on my journey each day and make the most of my opportunities," end quote. Carlos and Shirley Ann are not the only students benefiting from this program. OSP students graduated at a dramatically higher rates than their public school counterparts. The OSP students average close to a 90% graduation rate. 90% graduation rate. The DC public school graduation rate stood at 58% for the 2013-2014 school year, but I have heard that it is coming up, which is good, and we applaud that. But looking at a 90% graduation rate with the OSP is certainly an average that is very laudable. H.R. 10 works to ensure that students are receiving a quality education at a quality school. The bill provides strict accreditation standards for participating schools to ensure that these schools are offering students the type of education that they deserve. Additionally, the bill allows more students to take part in the OSP by eliminating the control group that was previously used for program evaluation. H.R. 10 subjects the program to a rigorous evaluation that will not arbitrarily exclude students from the program. This bill continues the three-sector approach, bringing more funding to all parts of education in the district while allowing more students greater access to quality education. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on this important bill, and I obviously support H.R. 10 today, and I welcome any questions the committee might have.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. We're delighted to have your cohort here. And Eleanor, I'm delighted that you're here. Good to see you. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm here to speak for the Democrats on the committee, and I'm here to speak for an amendment I have offered. And I want to stress that the amendment I offer is precisely consistent with the bill before us. I oppose the bill, but since the bill almost surely will be passed, my amendment aims to make sure that those children who do go to voucher schools receive the improved education that this committee is seeking. I do want to indicate that Chairman Chaffetz's 98% figure is one that is easy enough to reach if you are a private school and you have the ability to send children back to the DC public schools. Unfortunately, those figures were not kept, but I can assure you that that is what happened. Mr. Chairman, the chairman quoted some of my constituents at a recent subcommittee meeting. I want you to be aware that the amendment I am offering protects each and every one of those children. It is a compromise, the kind of compromise you don't see in the House any longer. But what I support is allowing every voucher student to remain in the program until graduation. What I oppose, in light of the track record of these students as measured by the congressional evaluation, what I oppose is putting new students into the pipeline by this bill. And that's what this bill does. It's basically to make sure that new students continue to be fed in. And again, I repeat, my amendment is consistent with those children, the children that are there now and the new students. There is an irony that I think I must mention, and that is, 3 weeks ago, that the House and Senate both defeated private voucher school amendments on the floor of this House, and by large margins, by the way. So here we have Congress rejecting private school vouchers or support for their children, but they want to impose voucher private school support on our children, even though we oppose it, just like the majority of this House and Senate has opposed it. Now, quite apart from the home rule notions that are always important to us, no one asked us. This bill was simply put in and says, here, take this. We would have had viable alternatives that I'm sure this Congress would have supported as well, involving charter schools. This bill was put in to help our children. The study that Congress mandated shows that far from helping our children, measured by math and reading scores, and that's how we measure DC public and charter school children. The objective measure, this bill has not improved the achievement of these children. Most important, the bill was aimed at the lowest performing public schools, and those children show no better achievement than they did in those low performing public schools. And that, but let's assume they did, because actually when the first bill came forward, the achievement was not as robust as it is today. But look what the District of Columbia has done. And I wonder if any of the districts represented by this committee has done as much. Almost 50% of our public school children now attend charter schools. And here again, I refer to my always looking for a compromise. Speaker Gingrich had the idea when he was here also to place vouchers on the district. I noted that the district had a startup voucher program, and it wasn't very good, but why not support the home rule alternative? Well, my heavens. Once the Congress said set up a board and try to recruit people people from the district for charter schools, we now have almost half of our children going to charter schools instead of to our DC public schools. And that was the way in which the Speaker compromised with us and got the support of Democrats and Republicans, because public charter schools are supported by both sides of the aisle. I'm looking for that kind of compromise in this Congress. Moreover, the National Alliance for Public Charter School ranks our charter schools as the strongest in the nation. Their competition with the DC public schools has yielded great benefits, because now we see great improvements in the DC public schools, so much that a recent study showed greater improvements in the DC public schools than in any public schools in the United States. But yet our DC charter schools outperform our DC public schools in precisely those categories where this bill is aimed. The charter schools outperform DC public schools among the lowest performing children. And then when we take them out by race, the lowest performing African American children do better in our charter schools. I am a strong proponent of charter schools. It's a home rule alternative, it works, and I wish that the rest of the Congress would take a look at it because of its success. Although I oppose this bill, I always look for ways to work with members. I'm in the minority. I'm not going to get what I am for. So I have looked for ways consistent with this bill when thinking of amendments. Indeed, I believe my amendments strengthen the current bill. Remember, the stated purpose is to improve for these students what is available in the district. I should think, therefore, we'd want to assure minimum standards for the schools that the voucher children attend. Now, for the very first time, there are standards to allow the voucher schools to be accredited. But isn't that amazing that as of now, children do not have to go to accredited private schools? You can imagine what kind of schools those are if they can't even get accreditation. The problem is it takes, it allows them a startup year and then another 5 years. By that time, there'll be a bunch of kids out of school that have spent much of their education in accredited voucher schools. I don't think this committee desired that It happened, though, because once people saw there was some federal money available, you had startup schools, particularly in low-income neighborhoods. And it's important to know where the majority of our students go and why it's consistent with this bill. The majority of our students go to Catholic schools. Every last Catholic school has always been accredited. Why should they have to compete with startup schools in the poorest neighborhoods where the parents see, well, look at this, there's another school close by, let me go to that school. We'd much rather, if we're going to have them going to private schools, have them go to accredited private schools, not take the next 5 or 6 or whatever years it takes to get an accredited to get to an accredited private school. So the first thing that my amendment does, it has 2 parts, is to reinsert what Congress itself put in. This was not my language. Congress required that the program be evaluated using the strongest possible research design. Well, who wouldn't want to know whether these children are improving or not? And so the strongest possible research design, of course, is a randomized controlled trial. Now, that it be fairly evaluated is very important, because if you want to make improvements in what you require, you want to know how the children are doing. We find that the voucher schools had not had significant effects or impacts, I'm sorry, here I'm quoting the words, did not have, quote, significant impacts on the achievement of students the program was designed to benefit most.
Ms. Norton, have you read the bill?
Yes, sir.
The bill very clearly makes sure that all participating schools must be accredited.
It's the length of time, Mr. Chairman, I'm
Well,
speaking.
they've got to be accredited, and you're sitting here making this committee believe that you have not.
No, sir, I just said that it would take at least, they would have at least 5 years plus a startup year.
Well,
They've
got to be accredited, and that's the main point about
And what do
this.
we do in those 6 or 7 years that nobody's accredited?
Well,
Well, I
ma'am,
think when I described for you, Mr. Chairman, if you let me get through my testimony, what kind of schools I'm talking about.
yes, ma'am. Ms. Norton, I do appreciate and respect that. This committee is not here to go through to have to understand all the nuances of the bill. What I will tell you is, as prescribed by law, they would be required to be accredited. And whether there is a determination about it being 1 year or 5 years might be an argument in the committee of government reform. But it is certainly not up for discussion here from the bill, because the bill has been put together. Secondly, I intend to try and deal honestly and fairly with you to allow your amendment to be discussed on the floor. So I would hope that you would allow perhaps the young chairman to be able to, or the committee to be able to get with you, and you to offline be able to determine whether you were or were not in favor of the 5-year, whatever process. But the law is that he's written is very specific. It must be accredited. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I very much appreciate, I want to make it clear, I very much appreciate that some accreditation requirement is now in the bill. This bill is a dozen years old, and this is the first time, and I think that means that this committee and my own committee have been paying attention to that. I'm simply thinking about the kids that are going to unaccredited schools, and that's the minority of schools. And frankly, Mr. Chairman, those are not the schools that anybody on this panel would support. And I want to emphasize why I speak about it, what it would be.
But Ms. Norton, if I am willing to make an indication to you that I believe we could make your amendment in order, and if I have read off the summary, the major provisions of the report that in fact the chairman has looked at this issue of accreditation, that I'm complying with the things that you would have wanted. And all I'm suggesting to you is this committee is not in a position to be able to articulate the nuances and the difference between accreditation. And I do appreciate you coming here, and I don't want to cut you off, but I'm saying we really don't have the ability to negotiate accreditation in this committee. what we do is we look at what the law is and hope that we make yours in order, and that then if there's nuances to that, that you would take that up with the chairman about how that may be changed in some sort of a conference.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not asking that you change the accreditation standard. I am simply indicating that if unaccredited schools were not in competition with our Catholic schools, then at least most of these children would go to accredited schools. And I did want the opportunity to offer you the reasons by way of example that this is important, since I know this bill is going to pass, and all I'm trying to exclude is maybe a dozen schools that I don't think anybody would support.
Ms. Norton,
Mr. Chairman, could
Yes, ma'am.
I ask a
Excuse me.
question? Ms. Norton, the chairman said at the beginning of this hearing, we would like you to submit your comments in writing that you have that are not directly related to what we're discussing here in the rule. And I would like to reiterate that to you, if you would, and to hear carefully what the chairman is saying to you for the purposes of our moving along this bill and considering the amendments.
You know, Mr. Chairman, this is the first time I've come before this committee where I've not even been allowed, it's me against the world, I've not even been allowed to get through my testimony.
You know what?
Before the committee looks like it wants me to stop testifying.
I respect that. I think also politely, we had said, gentleman, Mr. McGovern said, we're trying to hustle so that we can get our work done tonight. We have two other pieces of legislation. I'm trying to be very good to you. Matter of fact, you and I have not even had cross words, at least up to now. And I've told you, if in fact I think we could make your amendment in order, then this committee is politely going to accept that and then discuss the nuances on the floor. That's all I've simply tried to say to you.
I have no alternative, Mr. Chairman, do I, but to yield back, so I do that.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. Thank you very much. Mrs. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on your comments and mine in terms of our time constraints, if I have any comments, I will put them in writing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Slaughter?
Well, I agree with you. This is new. I've not been through this before either, but I believe I understand the meaning of it. The word has gone out that there will be a Republican caucus immediately after votes at 6:30. We normally take 3 hours up here. That means that all the time that the caucus is taking place, the meeting, we will have to stand by and wait to come back and finish. Now, I'm just extrapolating this because I just got here myself, but I believe that what you're saying, if I'm correct, Mr. Chair, is that we are trying to get through this so that we can finish these bills before we finish
Yes, ma'am.
votes.
Gentlewoman yield,
Is that
as
right?
Mr. McGovern politely stated
Mr.
earlier.
Patney stays. Is that what you said?
Well, with some
we want
caveats to
Yeah,
it.
you're right, yeah. Yeah, with a lot of, with a big caveat. But I guess my only point would be that if Ms. Norton's testimony hadn't been interrupted a couple of times, she could have gone through her entire testimony. But I understand you got something to do, and so,
Yes, sir, and
Well,
if the
let me
gentleman yields,
reclaim my time. Just
we
a
are
second.
trying to move so that we don't come back at 10 o'clock or
That's
11
true.
o'clock tonight
But-
and move this committee. And I was trying to say, tell me now, and the tell me now is, and I believe I could make your amendment in order, and I believe I could satisfy those requirements.
Well, I think I can sum this all up
Yes,
right
ma'am.
here, right now. We've been through all these bills before. These three have been around here years and years. The administration will veto it if it passes. Let me ask unanimous consent to put the statement
The objection, we'll put that in the record.
in the record. And these are one-house bills. The Senate will never take them up. So this is what we do a lot of the time. We appreciate you being here, both of you. And it does seem a little abrupt from the fact that we usually sit here for hours, hearing people go on forever. But I must say that I do appreciate the notion I won't be here till midnight, till after the caucus is over. Thank you for that.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman, Mr. McGovern. Gentleman from Florida, Judge Hastings. if the gentleman could get his microphone, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir.
I don't think it was appropriate to interrupt Ms. Norton, no matter the exigencies with reference to time.
Yes, sir.
I want to be on record.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the feedback from the gentleman, as always, and do appreciate that. Is there any other member of the committee that seeks time? Thank you very much. If you'll please leave anything you have in writing, I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. We'll now move to Judge Hastings. I understand you've got an amendment that would be amendment number
Chairman.
1.
I ask unanimous consent to withdraw my amendments. I would like, however, my statements to be included in the record.
Without objection, we'll enter the gentleman's statement in the record as it relates to amendment number 1. Is there any other member that seeks time? Seeing none, this now closes the hearing portion of H.R. 10. We'll now move to H.R. 692, the Default Prevention Act. The gentleman from the Woodlands, Texas, the chairman, Mr. Brady, as well as Mr. Sanders, please do come. I think both gentlemen will say it again. We are trying to get through this hearing expeditiously. We do appreciate and respect every member that is here. I do not want to cut off people, but when we get it, don't be surprised if the committee says we get it. We're going to make that in order, and we can begin the discussion on the floor. With that said, the gentleman from the Woodlands, Texas, Chairman Brady, you're recognized.
Chairman, thank you, members of the committee. I'm here to speak in favor of H.R. 692, the Default Prevention Act, offered by Mr. McClintock of California. Here's the reason I believe we all ought to support this bill. It would eliminate the risk of default once and for all. Let me explain. Under the laws, you know, the Treasury can issue only a certain amount of debt. That's why it's called a debt ceiling. Once Treasury hits that ceiling, it's legally prohibited from issuing more debt. Now, if Washington lived within its means, this wouldn't be much of a problem, because we all know it doesn't, not even close. Washington has spent way more than it should, and now the debts are coming due. Once we hit that debt ceiling, Treasury can't issue any more debt, even to make a bond payment. If we missed a bond payment, the consequence would be severe. Credit would dry up across the country. We'd shake the world's confidence in our economy and threaten our status as a reserve currency. And it would increase the U.S. government's borrowing costs, actually increasing the deficit the opposite way we want it to go. The idea of the United States of America defaulting on its debt is simply unacceptable. So this bill would allow the Treasury to pay principal and interest on current debt and free up Social Security trust funds to pay benefits. It simply guarantees we will never default on our debt. This is a common sense bill. I would urge my colleagues to support it. In advance, let me knock down 2 myths about the bill. One is that it is a plan to default. Just the opposite. This takes default off the table, so there is certainty going forward. Secondly, there is a myth that this prioritizes funding the federal government. It doesn't. This is debt neutral, and so as these debts come due, whether it is a family that holds a treasury, a teacher retirement fund, or a global investor, they are treated equally as those debts come due. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman is appreciated for his comments. Please do remember that while I began the hearing, I asked, but I'll ask again, anything you have in writing, we would appreciate if you please leave for our awesome stenographer to make sure that's in the record. The gentleman from Michigan is now recognized, gentleman, Mr. Levin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you can imagine, we very much oppose this. This bill is playing with fire, with the nation's credit standing. That's what happened in 2011, and the stock market plunged. S&P downgraded the credit of this country. 2013, the government was shut down. And this is playing with the nation's full faith and credit. It's also playing with the public's view of Congress and this Republican majority. I have some materials, I don't know if they've been distributed. Essentially what this says, have these charts? They have been. So under this, we pay foreign investors and the largest one is China. And we don't pay or put at risk everybody else. And to make this short, I'll just give you a few examples of whose payment is at risk. 1.4 million active duty troops and 827,000 troops in reserves, benefits to almost 4 million disabled veterans, payments for health care for almost 6 million veterans, home loan support for over 600,000 veterans, payments to small businesses, payments to physicians under Medicare, payments to 30+ million children in school lunch programs, and payments to tens of thousands of National Institute of Health grantees. It can be simply stated that default by any other name is default. So, in a way, I would hope you bring this up tomorrow so we can take the mask off of what's happening here. The President has just issued his statement of administration policy, and I will read the last paragraph. And I ask that it be inserted in the record,
Without objection. we'll
as
enter
well as the
this
charts
after.
that have been distributed, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, those, is this the one we're looking at?
Yes.
11, thank you very much. I'll make sure we include this to the stenographer.
I finish with the last paragraph. The President will not tolerate political gamesmanship, which caused the nation's credit rating to be downgraded in 2011 and proved harmful to both the U.S. and global economy. For this reason, if the President is presented with this legislation that would result in the Congress choosing to default on our obligations and imperil the full faith and credit of the United States, he would veto it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brady, there was a conversation that we had with the ranking member where he talked about all the bad things about this bill, but I chose to think it's wise management to take those things off the table that would raise fears, hysteria, and really outright just bad thinking if we didn't take that off and say that can't happen. Secondly, I've got a question, and that is, he talked about all these things, but the debt is at about 450 billion, but he talked about all the payments that would need to be made. Would we cut off everybody because we couldn't pay some bills?
No, in fact, lawmakers understand there's a difference between the debts, securities that come due, or that have to be rolled over, versus the day-to-day operating expenses. We saw this confusion in the Ways and Means Committee markup as well. There's a difference between those debts and those creditors, which you would have, for example, in your family budget as well, versus the day-to-day. Those day-to-day operations are Congress's responsibility. That's funded through our spending and appropriations bills. And so funding actually taking default off the table, ensuring there's a conversation about how we get our financial house in order as a country, actually accelerates the ability for Congress to make sure that we have the funding and the appropriations to actually pay those bills. Final point, Mr. Chairman. Washington is collecting revenue at the highest level since we have kept data. Per person, the last 12 months, Washington is collecting $10,161 for every American, the highest in record. The amount we've collected for the last year, highest ever. So we don't have a revenue problem in Washington. There's a big spending problem. This takes default off the table, allows both parties to explore the solutions to getting our spending under control.
Well, I tend to believe you're right, and I think it's important that we take the hysteria out of this and say that wouldn't be wise not to pay our bills and not to default, but rather to address the real issue at hand. Thank you very much. Mrs. Fox?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think Mr. Brady's done a very fine job of explaining the bill and the intent behind it. I thank both our colleagues for being here. I have no questions. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Slaughter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. According to the chart, Mr. Levin, 58% of our debt is held by foreign investors. And this, I know, is the old bill that we used to know as Pay China First. Is that correct?
That's
We've had it
that's
before.
a much more accurate description than the way this bill is described. The bill is described in 1984 kind of lingo, that it
Yeah.
avoids a default. By the way, if I might say, Treasury has made it clear that there's absolutely no way to prioritize the 80 million payments to soldiers, veterans, Medicare recipients, contractors, and Social Security beneficiaries. It would be uncharted territory, I quote, that's fraught with risk. So it's China first, and as to the others, you're in line, and we have no idea whether you'll be paid and in what order.
Let me quote again from the statement of administrative policy. I think this is well done. Any legislative proposal to prioritize certain payments over others is default by another name and would not protect the full faith and credit of the United States government or avoid the negative impact of default on American jobs and businesses. Such an approach would be the equivalent of a family saying it will choose to pay its mortgage but not its car payment, credit card, or student loans, and expecting that its credit worthiness will not suffer. It would cause the nation to default on payments of Medicare, veterans, national security, and other key priorities. Making some payments while not making others would be unacceptably risky and unfair to the American people. Do you agree with that, Mr. Levin?
Yeah, I think it's beautifully said.
Mr.
And I'll tell you, you know, the Republicans have played with fire twice.
Yep. A credit rating went down. I
And
remember
so,
that.
here we go again. I'm not sure what the motivation is for bringing this up tomorrow when there's going to be supposedly an effort to have a clean bill or something very close to it.
Sounds like they're not too sure, right?
Well, this would, I think, increase the uncertainty.
Or maybe the need to get it done.
Maybe this is a ploy.
Yeah.
I don't think we should use ploys when it comes to the full faith and credit.
Well, let me ask
US.
unanimous consent to put the administration statement in the record.
Without objection. Gentlewoman Yellbacker time.
I do.
Gentlewoman
Thank you.
Yellbacker time. Gentleman, Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask briefly, because I always like it when charts make things easier for me to understand. This is the ownership, this is, that you handed out, Mr. Levin, the ownership of privately held U.S. debt?
Yeah,
Is that-
I handed it out.
But the bill actually covers all the privately held debt as well as all the Social Security Trust Fund held debt as well.
This points out who holds the debt.
Well, this points out who holds part of the debt. Right? The
I know
rest-
part of the debt, part, and if you look at who the foreign holders are, it lists China, Japan, Brazil, Ireland, in that order.
Absolutely. I'm not disputing the accuracy of the half of the bill that you have explained in this chart. What I was asking about is this isn't the whole story. Thinking about how folks are only telling their half of the story, this is what goes on with the privately held debt. But what the bill does is protects us to make sure we're paying all the payments on the Social Security Trust Fund as well. The publicly held debt that comes due, the publicly held debt that folks rely on for payments to go out the door, this bill is protecting all of that
When you
as
say
well.
all, Mr. Woodall, all but not all the veterans, not all the physicians, not all the people who are doing health research, there are 80 million a month payments. And a lot of those are listed, as I read, and those are put at risk. You're saying China, we're paying you for sure, and the others, and the rest, we do not guarantee you get a single dime. Vote for that.
I don't fault you a bit for worrying about all of those other folks. I fault my colleagues regularly for having the ability to do something and choosing to do nothing instead. I believe, I agree with you that we should try to do even more. Should we bring another bill back that takes care of the Medicare trust fund, another bill back that takes care of the Social Security Disability Insurance Trust Fund? I think those are good ideas, and I'd love to see that go through committee and have that conversation. But we have the ability to do something here today, and to describe it as a ploy, as opposed to describing it as a sincere effort to make sure that no one is using default as a ploy in this institution, I think sells the chairman short. And sells Mr. McClintock and his effort here short as well. But I do appreciate these charts, Mr. Levin. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Mr. McGovern?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to say for the record that I value our veterans over China, and I prioritize our men and women in our armed forces over China, and I prioritize Medicare service providers and small businesses over China. And I think that's what this is all about. But it's hard to believe this is a serious effort. We did this in 2013. The president has said he's going to veto this. I doubt the Senate's going to do this, and so we're just kind of filling up time here, and we'll get right to the edge and have to figure something out. But surely there has to be a better way to run this House than this. So appreciate everybody being here, but. I think this is a really bad bill, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized. Gentleman does not seek time. Thank you very much. Gentleman from Florida does not seek time. I want to thank both of you for being here today.
Thank you.
You've been very clear about your support or the reasons why you don't support the bill. I want to thank both of you. Please remember that if you have anything in writing, please leave it for us, Mr. Stenographer. Thank you very much. This now I do not see any other members seeking time on H.R. 692. This now closes the hearing portion of H.R. 692. And we would now move to the H.R. 1937, the National Strategic and Critical Mineral Productions Act of 2015. I notice that the gentleman from Colorado is here with us, and we're delighted to see you, Mr. Lamborn, and we're expecting Mr. Lowenthal, who is right there. Mr. Lowenthal will get you to please join your colleague. And I will want to remember that Judge Hastings has an amendment that he would wish to speak to also, Judge, and so we'll do that as soon as we finish here. Welcome to both of you. If you've been here for some of the fireworks early on, you figured out we're trying to get through these bills in some judicious manner. We would appreciate you clarifying what you're for, what you're against, what the bill's about. We don't want to deny you the time, but we do want to hit the effort, and I know that both of you recognize that. Without objection, anything you have in writing will be entered in the record. The gentleman from Colorado Springs, Colorado, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thanks for allowing me to speak, and I'll make it very brief because I know time is a consideration tonight. H.R. 1937, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act of 2015, was reported favorably out of the Committee on Natural Resources and has been passed 3 times over the past 2 Congresses with bipartisan support. As with past iterations, this bill seeks to streamline the permitting process for the development of minerals that are crucial to American life. These minerals support many sectors, including telecommunications, military, healthcare, and energy. Furthermore, this bill clarifies determinations to be made under the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, by allowing the permitting agencies to substitute state or federal actions that functionally equate to the requirements of NEPA, thereby limiting the often duplicative regulatory efforts undertaken by permitting agencies. We ask for a structured rule of the bill, and with that, I'm prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lowenthal.
Thank you, Chairman Sessions and Ranking Member Slaughter, and members of the Rules Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this evening regarding the rule for floor consideration of H.R. 1937, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act. Unfortunately, I don't believe this bill takes us in the right direction when it comes to mining in this country. Most significantly, the bill is written far too broadly. Instead of focusing on minerals that are truly critical and strategic, such as rare earth elements that we import almost entirely from foreign countries, and we do have a supply risk. It defines practically every mineral that is mined in the United States as being critical and strategic. This results in a situation where even sand and gravel are considered to be critical and strategic minerals. And I won't deny that sand and gravel are important, particularly for building roads and numerous other applications. But being important does not make a mineral critical. The National Research Council is very clear in 2008 in their report that in order for a mineral to be considered critical, there must be few or no substitutes, and there must be a risk of supply chain disruptions. There are roughly 6,500 sand and gravel quarries in the United States. There's no risk of supply chain disruption. This point was confirmed by one of the majority witnesses, a mineral economist, who at our June Natural Resources Committee hearing on this bill said there's an abundant supply of sand and gravel. In addition, none of the witnesses, and I repeat, none of the witnesses at that hearing could name a single mineral that would not fall under the scope of this bill. That's why I filed an amendment that would replace the overly broad definition in this bill with one that uses the 2008 findings of the National Research Council that allows the Secretary of the Interior to designate additional minerals as critical and strategic if they meet the three-part test of being important, of having few substitutes, and exhibiting a risk of supply chain disruption. I think this would be an important step forward in focusing this bill on minerals where we really do need a strategy to increase secure domestic supply. For example, for the rare earth elements where we have to import 100% of our supply. I hope that you'll make my amendment in order so that we can try to focus on this bill, on the bill's truly critical and strategic minerals. Other Democratic members of the Natural Resources Committee have also submitted amendments to fix other problems with the bill, including one by Ranking Member Grijalva to require companies that are currently mine royalty-free, paying no royalties on public lands, to pay something back to the U.S. taxpayers for the extraction of these public resources. As this was made very clear this summer in the Gold King mine in Colorado, there are literally hundreds of thousands of dangerously abandoned mines throughout this country, and many of them are continuing to release toxic acid mine drainage into streams, into rivers, into lakes. The money raised from this modest royalty in Ranking Member Grijalva's amendment could be used to help clean up these abandoned mines, and I believe this idea is long overdue. Thank you for your consideration of these amendments, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lowenthal. Mrs. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, again, our colleague who advocates for this bill has done a fantastic job. I thank Mr. Lowenthal for being here and presenting his side of the issue. I have no questions, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Slaughter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me read from the Statement of Administration Policy. Administration strongly opposes H.R. 1937, which would undermine existing environmental safeguards for, at a minimum, almost all types of hard rock mines on federal lands. Specifically, H.R. 1937 would undermine sound federal decision-making by eliminating appropriate reviews under the National Environmental Policy Act if certain conditions are met, circumventing public involvement in the mining proposals, and bypassing the formulation of alternatives to proposals, among other things. Although the legislation purports to limit litigation, its extremely short statute of limitations and vague constraints on the scope of prospective relief that a court may issue are likely to have the opposite effect. The administration supports the development of rare earth elements and other critical minerals, but rejects the notion that their development is incompatible with existing safeguards regarding the uses of public lands, environmental protection, public involvement in agency decision-making. I ask unanimous consent to put this into the record.
Without objection.
And again, this is, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Does any Republican seek time? Seeing none, the gentleman from Massachusetts, the gentleman from Florida. I want to thank both of you. This is what happens when you have a chance to see something 3 times. You generally have a chance to recognize it and see it for what it is. I want to thank both of you, not only for taking time to be up here. Alan, have you been here before?
No, this is my first time, Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
we're delighted that you're here.
I hope it's not my last.
Don't be fooled by how well it went today.
Well, I think you did well enough to get invited back.
Thank you.
Best behaved.
And we're trying our very best, but we're also a group of people that are trying to get our job done today. And we evidently rushed one of our guests today. It did not make her feel good, and it did not make me feel good, and I feel badly about that. But I want you to remember, we took at least an extra minute with you, pat you on the back, Doug Lamborn, pat you on the back. Thank you very much, and I want to thank you both. If you'll please leave anything you had in writing for Awesome Stenographer, we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Judge Hastings.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I'll be very brief, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment that I would offer, but before doing so, once in a while, we have an opportunity to have some experts come to work with us, and Kevin Ashley, who is seated back here, came to work with me from the Society for Metallurgy and Exploration about 3 weeks ago. And so I had some real expert input, aside from echoing very strongly Mr. Lowenthal's amendment and hope it's made in order. I also asked that my amendment be made in order, which includes the notion that H.R. 1937 has a very broad definition of, and I quote, strategic and critical minerals, unquote, that does not take into account whether these minerals are actually in short supply in the United States. Under the definition as written, cement, wallboard, as well as gold and diamonds would qualify.
Thanks, sir.
And it makes one wonder if there's a strategic and critical shortage of jewelry in the United States. The authors of this bill say they do not wish to identify which mineral products are strategic and critical, since this may change over time with changes in national priorities. Therefore, I urge the committee to make in order my amendment number 1, which adds a simple test. This amendment requires proposed strategic and critical minerals projects to demonstrate that domestic capacity to produce strategic and critical minerals is less than 80% of domestic requirements. This will eliminate mineral products such as sand and gravel, which the authors claim the bill was never meant to encompass. The amendment also requires that unless or until the domestic capacity for a strategic and critical mineral product exceeds 80% of domestic requirements, the public will be notified of the intent to transport or sell any final or intermediate strategic and critical mineral products outside of the United States. Again, Mr. Chairman, most respectfully, I urge the committee to make in order my amendment number 1, and I thank you.
Judge Hastings, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the gentleman? Seeing none, I want to thank the gentleman very much. This would now move the committee to close the discussion testimony on H.R. 1937. This closes that hearing. And we are now on target at 5:55 p.m. to ask for the committee now to consider a motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee grant H.R. 10, the Scholarships for Opportunity and Results Reauthorization Act, a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendments recommended by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, now printed in the bill, shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule makes in order only those further amendments printed in the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in the report. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2 of the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 692, the Default Prevention Act under a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the bill shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit.
You've now heard the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Is there amendment or discussion?
Oh, yes, Mr. Chairman, I have an
Gentlewoman's
amendment.
recognized.
I move the committee grant H.R. 10 and H.R. 692 each an open rule so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments on the floor.
Discussion?
No discussion.
No discussions. Hearing none, seeing none, the vote will now be on the slaughter amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Those have it, noes have it.
Roll call.
Gentlewoman asks for a roll call.
Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Cole? Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Stivers? No. Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? No. Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse? Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
3 yeas, 6 nays.
Motion amendment is not agreed to, not agreed to. Affirmative amendment or discussion. Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it, the ayes have it. And the gentlewoman from North Carolina, the vice chairman of the committee, Mrs. Dr. Fox, will be handling this for Republicans.
And
Chair will
Mr. Hastings.
And Mr. Hastings. Chair will now be in receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 1937, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act of 2015, a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the bill shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill. The rule makes an order only those amendments printed in the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in the report. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
You've now heard the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Is there amendment or discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I
Gentlewoman
have an
from New
amendment.
York's recognized.
I move all that the committee grant H.R. 1937 an open rule so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bill on the floor.
Discussion.
No discussion.
No discussion. Those in favor of the slaughter amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Noes have it, noes have it.
Roll call.
Gentlewoman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Cole? Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Stivers? No. Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? No. Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse? Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
3 yeas, 6 nays.
Amendment is not agreed to, not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Ayes have it, ayes have it. And the amendment will be handled by the gentleman from the state of Washington, Mr. Newhouse,
And Mr. Polis.
and the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis. I would anticipate that we will schedule our next meeting for Thursday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
Thursday at 3 o'clock. Today's Tuesday, I think. So
Be the reconciliation bill.
it will be. It will be. Maybe more, but at least that. And I would anticipate we'll have that. I want to thank all of our members and all of our awesome stenographers for their great work. And I do want to express that the thanks to the committee for working through this so that we could avoid having to come back at a later time. And I do recognize that this caused a little bit of heartburn to people, but thank you very much. This now finishes our work for the day.
Sorry, I didn't mean to give you a hard time.